What is up, everybody? Welcome into episode 18 of Chris and Company. I am Chris Castellani. Thank you very much for tuning in today. I have a very unique interview coming today. A little bit different than some of the interviews that we've done before, but it should be a lot of fun with Anthony Ianni, former Michigan State basketball player, the first athlete in the Big Ten, at least in terms of basketball, to be diagnosed to be on the autism spectrum and play Division I basketball in the Big Ten. So pretty remarkable story. Local guy as well, went to Okemos High School. So I'm really looking forward to asking him some questions, telling more about his story and learning more about his story. He wrote a book that obviously we'll promote here, but really looking forward to that. But before we get into the interview, just want to kind of get the normals out of the way. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Let's get those watch hours up. If you click that little bell notification, you will get notified every time that I upload a video on here or a podcast or anything on this YouTube channel. Of course, we are on Apple Podcasts. We are on Spotify. You could check out those links as well. Everything that your heart desires in terms of Chris and Company is listed down below. A couple new ideas that should be coming around the bend. Is that still a thing? Coming around the bend here pretty soon. We are kind of working, spitballing some merch ideas. Austin and I have been in correspondence. We have another graphic designer who's kind of been working on some stuff. That might be a ways out, though I don't know. By the time this is uploaded, I'm recording these kind of far out in advance, so who knows. And as I talked about at the end of the last episode, we are trying to work on getting ad sponsors. So if you have a company or a brand or a restaurant or anything that you want to be promoted here on Chris and Company or on my Detroit Tiger videos and just videos in general on social media, you can hit me up. My DMs are open on Twitter, or you could leave a comment down below in this video if you're watching this on YouTube. I'd be happy to talk with you. I'm kind of new to this, but I'm trying to do the independent thing for a while. I've been, blessed with a really unique opportunity here. And I'm betting on myself, but I also know that takes time and that also takes some cooperation. But I'm really happy with what we're doing right now. And I'm very, very excited for this particular interview. I think that one of the things that this show can be is a variety show, but not in the way that, like a Bob Hope variety show. I mean, a show that provides a lot of variety with its interviews. Don't get me wrong. I have loved talking to the Tigers and talking to AJ Hinch and talking baseball. That will never get old. But there are other things in this world, believe it or not, that I am very passionate about that I want you guys to learn about as well. And hopefully that can come across in this interview with Anthony Ianni. So let's just jump right ahead and get to the interview. Chris and Company rolls on. It is episode 18, and today's very special guest, we are joined by motivational speaker, author, former Michigan State basketball player, first person with an autism diagnosis to play basketball in the Big Ten, the writer of Centered, Autism, Basketball, and One Athlete's Dreams. Anthony Ianni joins the program today. Anthony, thanks for doing this, man. How are we doing?
I'm doing good, Chris. Thanks for having me. How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. I really appreciate you coming on. You were on when Austin and I were talking about ideas of people we wanted to have on when this show first started. You were on my short list. I really am looking forward to this conversation. We're going to kind of weave in and out between your basketball career, your time at Michigan State, your post-career at Michigan State, but also, your autism diagnosis is something, and that's a topic that's very near and dear to me. So I want to start with that. I know your story kind of, at least in as it pertains to the autism spectrum, begins. You were 4 years old when you received the diagnosis. Do you have any recollection of that time?
I mean, not really. Obviously, during that age, I was just kind of really getting used to everything. But I do know, like in some of the preschools that I was in, I just remember like a lot of loud noises and just like doing a bunch of different things. But during that time, we were in Athens, Ohio. My dad worked in the athletic department at Ohio University. So I remember very vaguely about my time in Athens when I was born. But I think the more I started to kind of get older, especially around the middle school days, is probably when I started to notice that, I was in a resource classroom with kids with different learning disabilities, with kids that were just like me. Some had autism, some had reading comprehension, some had ADHD, ADD. So around that time period is kind of when I knew, I kind of had a learning disability, and I didn't really know about the autism diagnosis until I was a freshman. But right around like when I was 4, like I really didn't remember a whole lot, as a young kid, especially about that diagnosis and what my parents were trying to look for when I was a younger kid.
You brought up loud noises, and I don't know if you relate to this, but growing up, were you a kid that had to cover your ears when the buzzer rang at a basketball game?
Oh yeah, like I barely went to Michigan State football and basketball games because just the sounds of the crowd, the buzzer on the scoreboard at the Breslin Center, the lights in the arena, the announcers, like it was just all too much of a sensory overload for me, to the point where I did have my hands over my ears. I had my head in my mom's lap because it was just too much. And then my mom would then take me and my sister up to the concourse, where she thought there'd be less commotion, but there was actually more, because you got a lot more people walking around on the concourse in the stadium at Michigan State and the Breslin Center. And it just made it even more tougher for me. But, one of the ways I was kind of able to kind of control the environment around me was the more games I went to, I would just like put my hands over my ears and then just like slowly take them off at games. But then when it was too much, put them back on. So I did that at every game when I was a little kid. Then it got to the point where I just did it so much, like I was just used to the sounds and the people around me after that. So I told Dr. Temple Grandin the story, and she's like one of the biggest advocates in the autism community around the world. And when she and I were having dinner about 6 years ago, and I told her this story, like she was just amazed about how, at such a young age, I can like control like my environment around me, just like by doing the simplest things of covering my ears and like opening up and covering them back on. So it was very hard for me as a kid to deal with that type of environment. But, the more and more I was growing up around it, and the more and more I got used to the noise levels, it basically became nothing for me after that.
Was there a certain age when you felt like you had adjusted better to those environments, and going to those kind of games felt like something that was more a leisure activity than stressful?
Yeah, I think probably around 7, 8 years old. One of the things I do remember the most was when, Michigan State volleyball was a big deal back in the day. And my mom, she would like do broadcasting for them on the TV stations back in the day. And so, I would go to a lot of those games, and they would have packed houses. And I remember they were in the NCAA tournament one time against Pepperdine at home, and it was a very loud environment. But like on game point, I don't know if you've been to volleyball games, but on game point or match point, everybody stands up, cheers, and that place would get loud. And I think right around that age of 7, 8 years old, I was kind of used to it after that. And it kind of became a norm for me after that. And I really enjoyed it after that, because that's kind of when it was like, oh, well, all these great Michigan State players, they play in front of crowds like this. Michael Jordan plays in front of a crowd like this. Like I would like to do this one day as well. So right around that age is kind of really when I kind of got the knack of, okay, cool. This is actually pretty cool in the long run.
Yeah, and that was probably like the inception of the dream, so to speak, of you ended up kind of playing there. We have a lot in common. You are an Okemos High School graduate, so you and I, two CAAC brothers in arms. I'm a Lansing Catholic guy. Okemos, obviously, bigger school, but we gotta find some commonality there. So you go to Grand Valley for a few years, and then obviously you transfer into MSU for your last 2 years, and obviously with you being the first person with an autism diagnosis to play in the Big Ten, that also meant that you were Tom Izzo's first player with an autism diagnosis. When you arrived on campus and in your kind of early months there, did you have any individual discussions with Coach Izzo about how he could best coach you given your situation?
Oh, yeah, 100. So when I had announced that I was transferring from Grand Valley State, I had other colleges calling me at the time. A lot of them were lower Division I, a lot of them D2, Division III, Adrian College, around that range. And but Michigan State is where I wanted to go. And the week after we had finals and Michigan State had their finals week, Coach Izzo and I had a one-on-one meeting. And he knew what my plan was. We just wanted to talk and kind of make things official. And luckily for me, I've grown up around the program since my dad started working there. And so I was at every practice, at every game. I was, even in high school, like if I had days off in practice, my dad and I were at that gym, I was shooting for 2 hours or whatever. And so coaches always knew my background. He always knew about me based on his conversations with my father, just, during their meetings when I was in high school. And we were just talking. And I told him, like, yeah, obviously I got a lot to earn when it comes to reputation, and obviously when it comes to being here, because, he gave me he was straight up with me. He's like, look, it's not going to be easy for you because you got a family member who works in the athletic administration office. There's going to be a lot of fan banner about it. Some people may say, like, your dad paid me off to have you on the team. Like, you're going to have to deal with a lot of that. Yeah. And I told him, I said, I don't care about that. Like, I want to play here. I want to play for you. And like, I will run through a brick wall to play for you. Like, I don't care what it takes. And so he just looked at me and he said, well, look, here's the deal. Like, I know you have autism, but I'm not going to coach you any differently because you have autism. I'm going to treat you how I've coached every single player here. I'm going to coach you how I've coached Patine, Morris, Jay Rich, Zach Randolph, even, Steve Smith and Magic Johnson, how they were coached. Like, I'm going to coach you like that. And I looked him right in the eye, Chris, and I was like, Coach, that's all I want. I don't want to be treated differently. I don't want any of this extra stuff because, I have a disability. Like, no, I want to be coached like how you coached every other player. And so from that moment on, like, he didn't even hesitate. Like, he flat out told me, like, look, this is how you're going to be coached, and I hope you're ready for it. And I told him straight up, like, yeah, I'm ready for it. Let's do this.
I feel like it becomes so much less isolating when you are treated like everybody else. At that point, you feel, I'm one of the guys here. And I think that, Coach Izzo, one of the things about Michigan State basketball, and especially Izzo's program that I respect so much, is that I feel like guys have a tendency, they enter as boys and they leave as men type of thing. I mean, the lessons they learn, not just in terms of the physical hardships that you go through in practices and stuff like that, but just with Izzo being a father and somebody who's, been around the program for so long. What's the number one lesson that you've learned from Tom Izzo, the coach, that you've carried over into adulthood?
I think how you condone yourself, on the court. Obviously, he's taught us, like, if you make a layup or you make a big time shot, like, act like you've been there. And, if you get rewarded, outside in the real world, like, kind of act like you've been there. Like, you can celebrate, but kind of act like you've been there. And I think obviously the respect piece has a lot to do with it too. He always told us to respect your opponents, no matter how good or bad they are, to always respect your rivalries and always respect the ones who may not like you as much. So I think those are definitely things that I took, from his coaching on the court and took it off the court. Because, I mean, you did say it best. I mean, we go to Michigan State as kids and we leave as men because of everything that he's taught us. And so I probably have learned more about life, Chris, under Coach Izzo than probably the basketball piece. Like, it's very, very close. It's very close because I learned a lot as a basketball player that I've taken over to coaching my own kids now and coaching their teams when it comes to basketball. But, from the life perspective and what he taught us as far as life characteristics goes and how to respect others and how to condone yourself, like, I really took a lot of those words and lessons to heart. And I try to pass those down to not only my own players that I coach at such a young age, but also pass them down to my own kids as well.
It's the best of both worlds, right? Because you have incredible success on the court. You were part of Big Ten championship team, but you're also learning so much off of it. And now, I mean, it's crazy to think because I was born in '95, so my entire life I know one Michigan State basketball coach, and it's Tom Izzo. And what I appreciate and respect is the sustainability that the same guy that was making Final Fours in 1999 was making Final Fours in 2019. What do you think it is that's allowed for him to maintain this kind of consistency and sustainability over such a long period of time?
I think how he develops players. I mean, I think Scott Van Pelt said it best. It was after the whole Aaron Henry incident during the NCAA tournament, and Scott Van Pelt kind of did his SVP final segment on his show. And one of the things he said about our program was, Tom Izzo doesn't have a 1-year problem. He's got a 4-year problem because he has guys who are so entrusted and loyal to him on a family basis because they know, he's tough on us, but he's going to make us better. And if you look at guys like Matt McQuaid, Cassius Winston, Kenny Goins, even guys like, Nick Ward, who was around for 3 years, and Xavier Tillman, like guys like that, who came in and didn't really put in as much as freshmen, but then ended up being All-Americans in the end because they trusted Coach Izzo's process. And I think the fact that he has that trust from his players is why players want to stick around. But I also think the family atmosphere he's developed in the 25 plus years that he's been in Michigan State, guys don't want to leave. They want to come back. I mean, we've had guys who played in the 80s and early 90s who Izzo didn't coach, but you guys they're all saying to me, man, we wish we had more of this when we were here at Michigan State. Judd Heathcote and Tom Izzo are so much alike, but it was also Tom that kind of kept going with the family vibe. And so, that's why, like, we've always talked as alums, like, whoever is the next guy to take over for him, it's super important for us to make sure that we continue to carry on that family tradition, to make sure the next guy understands, like, hey, the family atmosphere that has been built here, like, this is what's going to carry the program for a long, long time.
I think that there's always been such a remarkable sense of community within the program where, and I mean, you see it now. You see guys who played in '97 that come back in games in 2024 just to watch and sit courtside. I mean, it seems like there's been literally multiple generations now of guys that have come through that program and have been successful. Moving ahead to kind of like your time there and your career there, because you played on two different teams. First off, you were on the famous the aircraft carrier game against UNC. Kind of a bizarre experience. Obviously, I remember it with it being kind of damp on the court and stuff like that. But from your personal standpoint, you did something that not a lot of people get to do. You met a president. So if you could just talk about your experience meeting President Obama at that time.
That had to be one of the crazy experiences ever because, so kind of let me backtrack a little bit. So when my dad first started at Michigan State, Bill Clinton gave a commencement speech to our graduates at Spartan Stadium. And my dad, my sister, and my mom got to meet him. And I didn't get to meet him because I was young at that time. I didn't know who he was at the time. And so I was always jealous that my family got to meet a United States president. And then here we are with the chance to meet, at the time, a very popular, figure in Barack Obama and the First Lady, Michelle Obama. And so, but we had no idea how all this is going to work. Like, do we meet him in a tent? Does he come in the locker room? Like, how are we going to do this? So during pregame warmups, they took us in North Carolina behind this tent behind the court. And so they were standing on one side of the room. We're standing on the other. And here comes the Secret Service and head of Secret Service, shaved head like me, mustache, had the aviators on, earpiece in. He takes off his sunglasses and goes, "Okay, gentlemen, here's the deal. This is how it's going to work. We're gonna start with North Carolina. Go down, handshake. Now, when you shake the president's hand, you're not gonna shake his hand and go, what's up, Mr. Obama? What's up, Barack? You're not gonna do any of that. You're not gonna call him homie or brother. You're gonna refer to him as Mr. President. You're gonna say, hello, Mr. President. My name is so and so. It's nice to meet you. The First Lady is gonna be with him. When she comes, it's gonna do the same thing. You're gonna shake her hand, say, hello, First Lady. It's a pleasure to meet you. My name is so and so. You are not going to call her Michelle. You're not going to call her Mrs. Obama. You're not going to call her Bay. All right. You are going to call her First Lady. That part, we were all just like, who in here is going to like, and we're all looking at Adrian Payne. We're like, you're going to call her Bay, aren't you? You're going to be the first to do it. So, but then right when he walked into the tent, it's like everything just stopped. Like everything in time just stopped. And here he comes, like here he's walking down the lines. And he finally gets to me and I shake his hand, introduce myself, and he just looks at me and he goes, "Hey, you're graduating this year, aren't you?" I'm like, "Yeah, I am." I'm like, "Congratulations, good for you." And he walks away and I look at Austin Thornton and I go, I'm like, how the hell did he know I was graduating this year? Like, what? So it was just amazing. I remember Keith Appling was standing right next to me. And as President Obama was coming near us, Keith Appling literally was like a kid on Christmas. Like that's how excited he was. And I think for a lot of the guys on our team to be around this and to see these two iconic figures who not only are like one of the most powerful individuals in the world, but like the one who leads our country, good and bad. I think we were all just kind of like starstruck. And that was kind of like the first time I think a lot of us have been starstruck before. Mm-hmm. I mean, we met Magic and it's no big deal. We met Gerard Butler, when he was at Michigan State in 2010 and he came in our locker room. Like, we were never starstruck then, but when here comes President Obama, we're all like, oh my God, what do we say? What do we do? And so, and then how he left, it was really cool. So obviously, when him and the First Lady walk into the arena, they have Hail to the Chief, but apparently he has exit music too, which we didn't know. So he exits the arena and they told us, ladies and gentlemen, please stay where you were standing or please stay in your seats until the president has cleared the area. So I'm standing next to one of our soldiers. And I said to him, hey, like, this is kind of the first time I've ever done this before. Like, what happens if I move, like, say, 10 feet to my right? And he just goes, come here. He said, you see the tower right there? I'm like, yeah. He goes, you see that kind of black shadowy figure up there? He's got a nice rifle, sniper rifle in his hand that if you even try to move 20 feet this way, yeah, you're not going to make it home back to Michigan. I was like, oh, okay then. So
I'm going to stay here. I'm
staying right here. Let's just talk. So, yeah. But no, just that experience, Chris, it's something that I'm never going to forget. And it's something I've already told my oldest son about. And he was like amazed that I got to meet, a sitting president at the time. And, something like that. And even the aircraft carrier game itself, because I mean, we were all just like, how's this going to work? Because we all knew like, Mark Hollis, our athletic director at the time, we knew he had all these crazy ideas, but we were looking at the aircraft carrier designs, 6 months before it happened. We were just like, how is this even going to be possible? Because we were thinking it's just this little boat that you're going to put a court on. But I don't think we realized how big of an aircraft carrier really is. And once we actually got there and saw it, like we were just blown away by everything. And that was just an incredible experience altogether. And I tell people, Chris, like being a part of Big Ten championship teams was pretty awesome. But that moment, the aircraft carrier, that beat any Big Ten tournament, that beat any Big Ten championship team that I was a part of.
That's such a remarkable story. First of all, I love the fact that he knew that you were graduating. Like for him to do the research on every player. Like what a nice, like what a thoughtful guy. I think that's so unique. But my follow-up question to that is obviously that was an amazing experience. Like you said, did it make the game itself almost harder to play because of the whirlwind that came with all the hype? Like was the game almost kind of secondary in a weird way?
In a lot of ways, yeah. Because like even after the game, like as we were down and there was 20 seconds to go, like the entire arena kept chanting USA, USA. And in that moment, like it was hard for us not to care to lose because we wanted to win the game, but also at the same time, like we also knew that there was a bigger story on that aircraft carrier, which was the men and women who protect our country, the men and women who protect our freedom. And I remember after the game, Draymond brought both teams together and said, hey, we're all going to give our jerseys to the wounded, so find somebody who's been wounded, give them their jersey. We'll find a way to replace them. Like, it's not a big deal. So in that moment, like us in North Carolina came together in that moment. It was just like, this was bigger than a basketball game. It's about us as a country, because again, this was something that's never been done before. And for us to not only go out and, be able to, I don't want to say entertain, but to kind of go out and give a good performance on both sides, I think for our men and women of our armed forces was what we wanted to do. And both universities had to go there and represent each other with so much pride. And that's what we did. And so, I mean, even after the game, Coach Izzo wasn't necessarily crazy mad at us because we lost the game to the number one team in the country. But I think he knew, like, yeah, we lost, but the experiences you're going to have from this is something that you're going to be able to tell your kids and grandkids about because nobody else has ever done this before. And obviously there's been attempts to do more. There was one last year with Gonzaga and Michigan State, but I looked at that and I kind of still have bragging rights over those guys because I'm just like, hey, did Joe Biden come on your boat? Nope, because Barack Obama came on ours. Yeah. So my experience is better. But even then, like, it didn't matter who won or lost that game, but because like it was about USA, it was about the United States of America that night, and just like that experience itself, man. Like I've said it once, I'll say it 1,000 times more. Like that beats any Big Ten championship, in all honesty.
And it was so early in the season, too, before you kind of knew who either one of these teams were. And you played for two teams under Tom Izzo, and they were drastically different in terms of both expectations and results. The 2011 team comes in preseason number 2 in the country, still make the tournament, but by most metrics underachieve. You lose to UCLA in the first round. You come into the 2012 season as a ranked team, but I don't think anybody expected the season that you guys ended up having. You win a share of the Big Ten in the regular season. You win the Big Ten tournament. You end up getting a 1 seed. I mean, it's kind of a broad question because so much can change, but what was the biggest difference between 2011 and 2012?
I think leadership, because, I think obviously we had the high expectations the previous year, number 2 team, in the AP polls. And I mean, there was a lot of expectations, but, after we had lost to UCLA in the tournament that year, I remember walking into our hotel with Austin Thornton and Draymond Green. And I put my arms around them. I said, hey, like, we're not going out like this next year. I said, yeah, I may just be a walk-on, but you know what? I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure like we don't go out like this next year. And I think from that day forward, like everybody knew Draymond was our leader. Like everybody and their mother knew like he was the guy. But behind the scenes, though, Austin Thornton held guys together. Brandon Wood, who was a transfer, like he came in with some senior leadership and some value. Myself as, captain of the scout team and being that rah-rah guy and always making sure guys were doing all right. Like just being able to have some kind of leadership. And I think that's what Draymond really enjoyed about that team was like, it wasn't just him being the leader, Austin, myself, Brandon Wood, even some of the young guys, like they were chipping in too, Derek Nix, Adrian Payne, like the leadership all around was incredible. And we were trying to figure out a way to put Michigan State back on the map with college basketball's elite. And that was a team too, Chris, that was not ranked at all in the AP polls to start the year.
Were they unranked? God, I thought you guys.
Yeah, we were unranked.
Wow.
We were unranked. So we had a very good recruiting class coming in with Brandon Dawson, Travis Trice, and Brandon Kearney, but Austin and Draymond had the most combined minutes. They were the only two. It was like they had played 27 minutes total, like a game, compared to like the 5 minutes a game that the rest of the team was playing. So that kind of showed you the experience we had. But I think we kind of relished that too of, okay, sleep on us and see what happens. And I had a quote with Joe Rexroad. He had interviewed me earlier in that year. And he asked me, he said, what's the expectations for this year? And I said, you know what, honestly, our expectations are to get better every game, but we're Michigan State. Like the expectation for us is to win. And we're in a very tough conference, but we're a tougher program. We're a tougher team. And I think the tougher team's going to win the Big Ten championship, and that's going to be us. Yeah. So I kind of somewhat made a little bit of a guarantee to start that season, which I think Joe Rexroad was probably like, yeah, right. Like, come on, you have no experience on this team. Ohio State is the team to beat with those guys all back. But we just kept pushing. And obviously you lose to Duke and North Carolina back to back. But then after that, we go on a 15-game winning streak. Because I think after that, it was like, okay, we're better than what people think we are. We're better than what people think we're going to be. And so, but I think just the leadership and the camaraderie we had on that team, in my opinion, it completely blew away the 2010-2011 team by miles. And
that was a really good Big Ten too. I mean, that you brought up Ohio State. That was like right when Thad Matta was kind of at his peak. In fact, I think they went to the Final Four that year. And they did. Yeah, and then it was the year before Beilein's teams broke through in the tournament, but they won a share of the Big Ten that year. I mean, that was a really good, pretty stacked Big Ten conference. You brought up Draymond Green. Are you surprised by the career that he's had post Michigan State?
No, not at all. I'm really not, because when he got, so I was there at his draft night, the night he got drafted by the Warriors, and I originally thought he was going to go anywhere from mid to late first round. And when he did not get picked up in the late first round, my first initial thought was this is just going to motivate him even more, because you look how his career at Michigan State went. He barely went from playing as a freshman, to potentially wanting to leave. And then he's sixth man off the bench the next year. And then he's, Big Ten the next year as his junior year. Then he's All-American Player of the Year, Big Ten after that. So I knew there was going to be a lot of motivation behind that. And just seeing, what he has done has just been incredible. I mean, obviously the last couple of years, we've been able to do some autism acceptance and awareness events with the Warriors, which has been fantastic to do. And just being able to see him play live, I'm like, you know what, that's the same Draymond Green that I played in college. Obviously, a lot of people have a different perspective on him, sometimes because of the behavior. But I've also told people too, like, hey, like, one of the things he wanted to bring back to the NBA was that bad boy era from the Detroit Pistons, because he grew up on that. I grew up on that. Like, that's the one thing he always thought the NBA was missing, which is what he wanted to bring back. But just seeing how he's a 4-time NBA champion, a 4-time All-Star, he's been Defensive Player of the Year. That doesn't surprise me one bit that he's been able to accomplish so much, because he just puts in the work, and he is just a gym rat. Like, whenever he can get in the gym, whether it's at 2:00 in the morning, he's going to put in the work. And whether it's the littlest things or the biggest things, he's always going to have that chip on his shoulder and try to prove people wrong no matter what.
What do you think people get wrong about him?
Just who he is as a person. Like, I know there's a lot of people, including some of my own closest friends, who think he's a jerk. And I've always had to tell people the complete opposite. Like, look, no, like, you need to look past the basketball stuff. You need to look past the technical fouls. Like, look what he does off the court, not just for the autism community, but look what he's done for the community Saginaw. Look what he's done for Michigan State University. Look what he's done for the Bay Area. Like, look what he's done as a father and as a human being. Like, I tell people to look past the basketball stuff and just look at what he's done off the court. And obviously I still get pushback, but it's like, again, like, if you're just focusing on the basketball piece, you need to focus on the bigger picture. And even when I was a younger kid, like, there was some, I'm sure I'll use Reggie Miller as a good example. I hated Reggie Miller because he would always beat my teams with all the 3-point shots he's made. But I didn't know who he was as a person until I got older and learned about what he did off the court and what kind of a person that he really was. And I got to meet Reggie Miller, my senior year during the NCAA tournament. Nicest dude I've ever met, and so, but I think when you take the basketball glasses off and you put the binoculars down and just kind of get to know him, you'll walk away and go, he's really not that bad of a guy, So that's why I've always told people, like, get to meet him first, sit down, have dinner with him, just shoot the bull for a little while and get to know him, who he is as a person.
It's one of my favorite things to me about doing this show is that you get that kind of look behind the curtain with people. One of the earliest episodes we did was with Jaylen Watts-Jackson, and it's like internally I'm like, dude, you broke my heart. You broke my heart, man. And you sit down and you talk with him for an hour. Nicest guy, most humble dude. It's like there really is. He didn't do anything wrong other than make a play, but it's like it's to get that kind of different perspective is so unique. I brought up at the beginning. You wrote you covered a book called Centered. What was your plan, or I guess, let me rephrase that. At what point during your journey did you say, yeah, I think I'm going to tell my story one day?
Honestly, it didn't cross my mind until probably like, I didn't know how I wanted to tell my story in general. Cause in college I was kind of like, I didn't want to say anything, my teammates knew about it, but I didn't want the whole world to know. And then it was, Diamond Lee Young. Diamond wrote for the MLive.com for a while, and Diamond kind of heard about my story just talking to my parents for senior day articles, and he was like, hey, I kind of want to go this route. Are you comfortable with it? I'm like, you know what? Might as well. It's going to happen eventually. And so once that article got out about me being on the autism spectrum and playing ball for Michigan State, like everything just kind of blew up after that. The emails and the letters and the messages I got from so many people, not just in the state, but all over the country. That kind of made me, at the time think about how I wanted to go about things and tell my story. And it wasn't until, because you've probably been there before, Chris, like, at a time in your life, it's like, okay, I want to do this, I want to do that, or you're at a crossroads now. So that's kind of how it was my senior year in college. And so part of me wanted to go into athletic administration like my father did. Part of me just didn't know what I wanted to do at that time. So, but it wasn't until, Brian Calley, who was our lieutenant governor at the time in 2012, he gave me that opportunity to be a keynote speaker at an autism gala in Detroit a couple of weeks before I graduated. And I remember after I got done with the speech, I had said to my then girlfriend at the time, I had said to her, I was like, you know what? I think I know what I want to do now. I think I know what I'm meant to do and meant to be. And so I did speaking gigs for 11 and a half years, and I had so much fun with it. And then, but as far as putting my story from pen to paper, I think it was around 2018, so about 6 years ago, I was sitting in my hotel. I was like out of town somewhere. And I was like, you know what, like, it's time for me to put it out there. Just tell my story from beginning to, kind of toward the end of my Michigan State days. And I want everybody to know everything about me. And so, my co-author, the guy who helped me write the book, Rob Keese, Rob and I have a connection. So his cousin is married to my resource room teacher from middle school. So she's the one that introduced us, and that's how we kind of, started things off. And so, and just being able to talk to Rob and kind of go full detail and full invest in everything about me and my family, it was really cool. And just doing things that I felt was uncomfortable. I had to get comfortable being uncomfortable. So for example, all of my IEP evaluations are in my book. And a lot of those things are super personal. And at that time I was like, no, Rob, like, I don't want to, like, no, like, some of this stuff is embarrassing. He goes, well, hold on, just time out. Like, don't do what's best for you, the author, do what's best for your readers. So what I want you to do is sleep on it tonight and then give me a call in the morning. Chris, I didn't sleep because I called him back 20 minutes later. I'm like, all right, you're right, let's do it. And so, but it was just a lot of fun, like putting all those pieces together and reaching out to the Lynch State Journal, be like, hey, I'm putting this book together. Do you have any old pictures of me from my high school days? And they sent me a bunch of photos from my junior year when we were playing Holt in the regional finals, and me and Dan Stoltz, my coach at the time. Like, so it was a lot of fun, kind of just reminiscing back on the past and putting everything, from pen to paper. But I'd be lying to you if I said there wasn't a lot of stress and a lot of hard work that went to it, because it really was hard work. And for me to have to sit there and email my literary agent like almost every week, like, hey, do we have anything? Do we have anything? Like that? The toughest part was being patient. And so, but you know, it all paid off, and I'm very, very proud of how everything turned out. And I'm very proud with how a lot of people really like the story and really enjoy the book.
It's got to be a unique thing because you only get one chance to tell the story of your life like that. Like it's not, you know, it's only going to be in print one time. Do you have any plans on ever writing again?
Yeah, so my co-author and I, we are working on a second book right now. It's not more toward directed to me. It's more, so what we've done so far is we've interviewed, I think, about 15 different athletes who are on the autism spectrum. Okay. And each chapter is about them and their journey. And we interviewed their coaches and their parents, like just to kind of give a brief, detailed overview of, you know, what the coaches' experiences was like, what's their advice for other coaches who may coach, you know, student athletes with autism one day, what the families enjoyed about their experiences. So, you know, I told my co-author, I said, you know, I kind of want to get away from me a little bit, and I want to make it more toward an educational book and learning from others about, okay, these were my experiences. This is what worked for me, what didn't work for me. Because there really hasn't been a book about how to teach coaches how to coach other kids with autism based on other kids' experiences. So we're working on that one right now. I know my mom has always wanted her son to write a kid's book one day. With my schedule right now being a school administrator, I don't know when I'd be able to do that. But, you know, I've always told people the never say never attitude and never close that door. So I would like to do that one day. But, you know, like I said, you never say never.
And you got plenty of time still. I mean,
we got plenty of time, man.
yeah, you're not going anywhere. But no. you brought up earlier the video or some of the stuff that you did with Draymond to you know, raise awareness for autism. And in the video you and him did together, you had a really great quote where you said there's over 5.5 million people in this country with autism, but what those 5.5 million people have in common is that they all have really unique things and great traits that nobody else can do. You talked about memorizing like your middle school basketball stats, which is like, dude, that's like right up my alley. Like all the stuff. When I tell my high school tennis story, it's going to be so comprehensive of like point for point, like match for match. Like this is, so I totally relate to that. Would you say that right now we have a better understanding of autism than we did when you were in school?
Oh, hands down. Because when I was in school, like, you know, when I first started kindergarten, there was no resources or pathways or even guidance for families who were dealing with students with autism at that time. And I mean, if you fast forward now, the resources and the therapies that we have now and all these different nonprofit organizations, not just in the state of Michigan, but over the country, I mean, it's phenomenal to see where we're at. I think there's still more work to be done from an acceptance perspective. But at the same time, like, you know, I'll use my twin nieces as an example. So my sister's kids, like they were diagnosed at a year and a half. And I remember when my mom called me and told me, like, it kind of hit me for like 30 seconds, like, oh, dang, like my nieces are diagnosed, you know, they're just like me. But then I went right to work. I told my sister, I said, hey, call this person, that person. And so not even like 6 months later, they were in ABA therapy at Michigan State. Because initially the wait time to get into ABA therapy at Michigan State was anywhere from 8 months to a year. And my sister just didn't know what she was going to do. And so she told me the story about how, you know, so let me kind of backtrack a little bit. So this was at Christmas in 2019, and my sister gave me a WWE championship belt, which I've always wanted one. But like, you know, the deal was with my dad and my mom was if I ever won a national championship, like they would buy me like a world heavyweight title belt. That was the deal. When that didn't happen, I was like, oh, well, got to make my own money, I guess, to get my own $500 belt. So my sister gave me one for Christmas 5 years ago. I was like, what's this about? And she had told me what happened in Michigan State. So initially they were going to be on the wait list for like 8 to 12 months. But then when she was walking out of the building, I don't know who it was a receptionist or whoever, ran out and grabbed my sister, said, hey, just out of curiosity, are you related to Anthony Ianni? And my sister goes, yeah, he's my brother. And the woman just goes, you got to come with me. And 3 months later, they were in ABA therapy. Wow. So my sister had thanked me because of everything that I did for my nieces before they were born. And so, but it's things like that where it's like, okay, 20 years ago, that's not there. 20 years ago, you're trying to find a different path. You're trying to find different resources. And where we are at now, we have a much better understanding of what autism is and what the different characteristics are and all the different resources. But like I said before, from an acceptance perspective, I still think there's a need for that area a little bit more.
And in terms of acceptance, that kind of leads me into my next question, because I feel like awareness, in the long run, hopefully leads to understanding. And for the time being, there's kind of that gray area where there's just still some things people don't know. What do you think right now is maybe the biggest thing that the public gets wrong about autism?
I think what the public gets wrong sometimes, Chris, is they think there's just one type of autism when there really isn't. And so I think that's the one criticism I get from a lot of folks, is that whenever I go on speaking or whenever I've had one-on-one conversations with people about me, the first thing, a lot of them will say to me, well, there's no way you have autism because you're not that kind of person with autism. You don't have those characteristics. And my response always is, well, what characteristics are you talking about? Like, what is autism supposed to look like to you? And so that's when I get into the explanation of autism is a spectrum. You have the high end, which is what I'm on, which is what you're on. And you have, and there's low end of the spectrum, where, I met a lot of students and a lot of kids who are on that low end. They may have to have help for the rest of their life. Some are nonverbal. But like I said before, they all may be on the spectrum, on different parts of the spectrum, but they all got some type of uniqueness to them. And so that's the one thing I wish that society would understand is like, autism is not just one characteristic. It's not one person going through something. Like, we all go through something on the spectrum. And, I think until we kind of break that, I don't want to call it a habit, but until we kind of break that window of, hey, autism is more than just this, there's still a lot of work to be done. But I think that's the one thing society hasn't learned yet, is that autism isn't just, oh, you don't look like that type of person with autism. Like, okay, what does it look like to you? Like, it's a bigger deal, like, because autism is a spectrum. And I wish society would learn more about that.
You're right. It's a spectrum for a reason. And it's funny you bring that up. I think we can both relate to the, I'm sure we've both heard the, you don't look autistic. It's like, well, what do autistic people look like? I don't like, what is there? There's not exactly an archetype, so to speak, for what an autistic person looks like. So I appreciate that answer. One thing, just kind of going through your history and where you're at now in life that made me happy is that you found a lot of joy in your family and with the relationships that you've made with people, which is fantastic. I think not just obviously for you on a personal level, but I think for a lot of people who are on the autism spectrum, because that is something that people struggle with. It's social cues, it's maintaining relationships, it's boundaries and barriers. What advice would you give to somebody on the spectrum who might be struggling with maintaining interpersonal relationships?
Oh, man. I think for me, it's making sure that, you're going to hit a lot of bumps in the road sometimes when it comes to personal relationships, but don't ever give up. You're talking to a guy who has been in, and I don't talk about my personal life a whole lot, Chris, but you're talking to a guy who's, next week, be a full year, since my divorce was finalized. But, I'm dating a beautiful girlfriend now who's a Michigan State Spartan, by the way. So go green. But, just like, at the end of the day, like, if one relationship goes bad, like, and it's like, don't feel like it's over. Like, always know, like, there's always more opportunities out there for you. And I got blessed and lucky with where I'm at right now in my life with my girlfriend, because like, there were days, Chris, like I went down a lot of rabbit holes, the last couple of years. And there were times where, I was really down, really low, and just like whether or not like I can even like get back up, because I've been knocked down so many times in my life. I've been doubted so many times. And like, it just got to the point where I was just like, you know what? Am I meant to get back up again and continue to keep fighting the good fight with whatever I do in my life? And she kind of saved me in a lot of ways. She helped me become a better person. And so when you find that one, you know who it is. Like, you'll know right away. And just like how she's been able to, get me as a person. She doesn't want me to change. She wants me to be this goofy guy all the time that I always am. She, probably wishes at times I would kind of back off on my fandom when it comes to yelling and screaming at my sports teams on the TV. But, again, man, that's just who I am. But, my advice would be just continue to take your time and just know that at the end of the day, like, if you get knocked down, keep getting back up, because you're always going to find that one person in your life that always cares about you so much, and find the person that wants you to be you and to never change who you are and just be who you are.
I think one of the other important things too is to make sure, comparison is the thief of joy. And I think something that a lot of people kind of fall into is they say, well, these people who are my same age are getting married and they're having kids, and I'm still kind of struggling with the same thing. Just because it might take you a little longer doesn't mean you're not going to get to the finish line. And I think that's something that people got to, make sure that they know. So that's obviously a really beautiful answer. Real quick, a bit of a lighter question, real quick. You brought up how you've memorized a bunch of stats about your middle school. Give me the deepest Anthony deep cut. What's the number one statistic that you remember from that era? It could be Michigan State, it could be middle school, that you have that kind of rolls around in your head that you are certain nobody else knows about you.
Oh man, I gotta stick with the 6th grade stats, man, because so I'll give it to you right now. It went 12, 14, 16, 20, 33, 24, and then 12. And the crazy part is the day I hit 33 points was the day my mom had her jersey retired at Adrian College.
Wow.
So my mom is a 3-sport All-American. She is a Booker T, 5-time Adrian College Hall of Famer. She's gone in individually, and then the other 4 times were for teams. School's all-time leading scorer, 1,699 points, both men and women, and she has her jersey retired. And what people don't know is the day I dropped 33 in that game, 4 hours later, she's getting her jersey retired. And so my mom always says to me, the day that day, she said the jersey retirement was cool, but seeing her son just go out and just drop 33 on people, she said that was even more special.
That's incredible. 2 more questions for you. Yeah. And this is one that I'm curious to ask you, and it's something that I know a lot of people who are on the spectrum have struggled with. But, at the age you're at now, given everything that you've been through and all the success you've had, mm-hmm. Do you ever wish you weren't on the spectrum?
Not at all. Not at all. Because, and I've had students ask me this question before, Chris, whenever I go and spoke. And one of the questions they've asked me was, do you wish you could be quote unquote normal? And I've always told those students, I say, you know what? No, because if somebody offers me a contract for $100 million and says, hey, we'll give you this amount of money if you let us cure your autism, so we can kind of use you as a guinea pig to see if it works or not. We'll give you $100 million. I always tell folks I would rip that contract up and be like, no, because autism made me know who I am today. It helped me not only make history, but it helped me become a better human being. It helped me become a better person, a better father, a better boyfriend, a better teammate, better friend, better son. And so autism made me know who I am. And it's something I don't ever regret living with, because it's something that I can help teach others about. It's something I teach my own students about. It's something I teach my own staff and faculty about at the school I work at. And so it molded me into who I am today. And I would never, ever, ever, want to say, oh, I wish I didn't have it, because, it's who I am, and and I'm not ashamed of who I am at all.
It's a powerful answer, man. And I appreciate that, obviously. And I think it's so funny when that question is asked of would you prefer to be normal? And the older I get, right, especially, the more you realize what is normal. I mean, really,
right, exactly.
What exactly? I can't find me somebody that by the textbook definition is normal, and I'll find you a person that's probably relatively boring. I stories like yours and the people like you and the people I've had on the show are so much more fascinating, because I don't think I've had a normal person on the show. And that's what right. I mean, that is the highest compliment possible, to get to the place that you're at personally or professionally, whether it's you, whether it's a guy who's pitching for the Tigers, whether it's a guy who's playing for the Lions. You have to be exceptional at something in a way that is relatively abnormal. So I obviously appreciate that answer.
Well, it's like I always tell students, it's like, if we were all the same, like you said, the world would be the most boringest place ever. Like if we were all Tigers fans just cheering for the Tigers, okay, we can only cheer for one sports team. It's kind of boring. We all have different teams we want to cheer for. And so that's why I've always encouraged students, being different is okay, because, you may have some in common with that person, but it's okay to have different opinions, different sides, or cheer for different teams. And so, I got friends of mine who are big Michigan fans, and I got no problems with them at all, except for when they beat us. But, but again, like you said, if we were all the same, the world would be the most boringest place. And, it's also like that saying too, find somebody who's the most perfect human being in the world. If you're perfect, God bless you. God bless you. But there's no such thing as perfect, and there's no such thing as normal either.
Yeah. I had one more question, but you brought up the Michigan rivalry there for a second. That was kind of the beginning of that decade-long window where that was a top 3 rivalry in college basketball,
Yep.
top 2. I mean, really, there was a period legitimately where after Duke UNC, you could make the argument that was the most competitive rivalry in the country. I guess, how did both before you got to Michigan State and after, how did your perceptions of that program change as John Beilein started to see more success?
I think a lot of it had to do with the respect factor that Beilein brought. Not once did I didn't see a lot of his guys talk trash a whole lot. I didn't see them, go to the media and try to throw dirt on Michigan State or Ohio State at that time. Like, John Beilein, his blueprint and Jordan Morgan and I had become really good friends, because that was a guy who at the time wore the jersey. I hated him. Like I want nothing to do with him. I hope they lost every game in every sport that time, but just getting to know him now and just like what kind of a guy he is, a family man, and just like having those side conversations with him. I was like, this guy's pretty cool. But like, we talked one time and he told me about how Beilein's blueprint was Michigan State because he wanted his program to reflect what Michigan State was at that time, which was hard-nosed, blue-collar, but respectful, no matter what. And so he took our blueprint and brought it over to Michigan. And so he was maybe, in my opinion, one of the most well down to earth, respected individuals I ever met as a coach, and just who he is. And just like, so when he left, I was a little sad when he went to the Cavs because I was like, what, like why? But like, I understand why at that time, but just like what he did for Michigan at that time was incredible. And just seeing kind of where it is now, like, I know Dusty May is the right decision. Like he'll get it back there, I believe. But just those years of Beilein that was so much fun. And it was respectful at that time. And I think when Jawan came in, the respect factor just went out the window after that. And so I hope one day, Chris, it gets back to that, because that's the reason why I left social media, why I left Twitter, is because just like the fan banter going back and forth and people take it personal in the rivalry, I'm just like, I can't do this anymore. And so I've been off it, like, and I'm glad I'm off Twitter because I don't have to worry about all that anymore. But it's just like, just seeing the respect factor go from here top notch and then being brought down right after Beilein left. It's like, you could tell there was a big difference, when he left.
I'd agree with that. And I think it's one of those things where I've accepted it's kind of a lost cause in football. There's never going to be a ceasefire. There was that decade in basketball where it's like there was this respect. And I remember those 2 years when Beilein went to the Final Four. I mean, he made multiple kind of deep runs, but I remember thinking like, wow, it's kind of nice to root for a Michigan team that the rest of the world doesn't hate. Like there's people people love Trey Burke and they love that story of the teams that he had, and they obviously love Beilein. He was, obviously I think the ideals were very similar between him and Izzo and the way they developed players and the way that they grew their program of just kind of maybe not always getting the best players, but getting the right ones and who ended up turning into the best players.
And Beilein did the little things too. Like, so my senior year, we beat them at home on Super Bowl Sunday. It was the first time we'd beaten them in 3 tries. Yeah. And so we should have beaten them at their place early in the year, but they made the plays to beat us down the stretch. So, but after the game, so we were up by like 17, 15 points, and Izzo put me in like the last minute. And that, to me, that was a big deal for my family because my dad grew up in Dexter, and him and my late uncle were the only 2 Spartans in the family. Everybody else was Michigan. My late grandfather had season tickets to Michigan football. Him and my grandmother have a brick outside the big house because they were big Michigan donors at the time. And when it came to Michigan State, Ohio State, my grandfather hated everything when it came to those 2 teams. But so that was a big deal for me to get in that game. And so we were going through the handshake line, and usually you shake the coach's hand and then you just keep walking. So I shook Beilein's hand and I'm about to walk, but he pulled me back and he said, hey, like, even though we weren't the ones that won today, I'm really glad that you got in the game today because Tom has told me nothing but about great things about you and how you work your ass off. And I'm just like, Coach, I appreciate that. And when I walked out of the handshake line, I was like, you know what? Like, he didn't need to do that. He did not need to say those things to me. Like, he just could have just shook my hand and walked past me. But no, he took 30 seconds to acknowledge that. And I thought that was one of the coolest things that I had ever seen a head coach do during my time at Michigan State, but I thought it was really cool, even considering it was a big rivalry at the time.
That's an incredible story. I think a testament, obviously, to his character and the coach that he was. This is the last question for you, man. I always like to end that with something kind of introspective. You know, you've been through so much personally and you know, obviously with your basketball story. But let's say that you right now, in 2024, you have a chance to sit down with the version of you that's first step foot on Michigan State's campus to play for Tom Izzo. What's the one piece of advice that you would give him?
Man, I think the one piece of advice I would give myself who first steps on campus to play for Coach Izzo is just to take it all in and embrace it as much as you can. Because, you know, there are days like I look back on those games that we played at when I was at Michigan State, and I'm like, man, like I wish I could just go back in time. Like the old Uncle Rico from Napoleon Dynamite quote, I wish I could go back in time. I take state like that would be my advice to my younger self, is to embrace it and take it all in and not worry about the BS as much. Like, yeah, you're going to have fans that are going to get on you, rag on you, but you know what? Like, really take in the times and the moments that you have in that arena, in that locker room with your teammates and coaches, because you may never get an opportunity like this again. And Chris, I did have a couple of opportunities to potentially go overseas and play, but I didn't want to do it because like I had grown a little bit tired of basketball and I want to do different things. But I would just, you know, I don't regret it, but I look back on the memories and the times that we had at Michigan State. And when we have our reunions every year, I'm like, man, like I wish I can have one more year with my teammates, you know, because honestly, Chris, if anything, I miss the camaraderie more than anything. I miss being able to be done with practice, go eat dinner in the locker room, and just, you know, shoot the bull with the guys and just talk it up, yuck it up, talk trash. The team dinners, like going to watch our managers play in the intramural rec league tournament, like just being able to do that I had so much fun with. So I would tell myself from 14 years ago, hey, embrace it. Enjoy it because it's going to go by super quick, and also make sure you go to Rick's or the Riv a couple times before you graduate, before your senior year is over.
Right on. Yeah, I mean, it's no matter what you do, I feel like as human beings, it's like our nature to not live in the moment, like to just always look ahead to like what tomorrow has in store, you know, planning for the next day, the next meal, the next game. Mm-hmm. So I mean, it's nostalgia is a powerful thing in that way, where you look back and you, of course, you obviously miss things, but you've made the most of your journey. Anthony, you're a remarkable human being, man. You truly are. Your story, I think, is incredible. This is an interview that's very meaningful to me, and I'm genuinely, I can't wait to share it with people. And thank you so much, man, for coming on here and telling your story. I tried to ask you stuff you hadn't been asked maybe before in the past. You know, I didn't want to give you a bunch of generic questions because I know you took the time out to talk to me. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for everything you have done and will continue to do. And thanks for being on Chris and Company.
No, thanks, Chris. I appreciate you, man. Really do.
Thank you. Our interview with Anthony Ianni, as he said, I apologize. I'd watched so many interviews. I'd heard Ianni every single time. So that's a mistake on my part. My bad. I pride myself on my research. Maybe I should do more research. But outside of bungling the name, I am very proud of that interview and very proud of Anthony for telling his story. That was very special. And I don't. People who are watching this on YouTube, I can't pinpoint the exact moment, but 18 episodes in, might have gotten a little misty-eyed at points when I asked him the question about if he ever wishes he wasn't on the autism spectrum. I thought that was a beautiful, beautiful response by a wonderful human being. I really hope that this connects with people. Look, this show, we're going to have a lot of fun, and we're going to interview sports figures and athletes, and we're going to talk Tigers and all the fun things that I enjoy and find fascinating. But at the end of the day, what I want this show to be is a show about a guy who's learning to understand people better. And, you know, I try to play into it sometimes, but I don't like the awkward label, you know, it bothers me. And to have this outlet and this opportunity to talk to the people that we talk to, I'm very fortunate. That was a very personal interview for me. And I believe that Anthony's story will continue to connect with a lot of people. So thank you so much to him for coming on. Yeah, if you're watching this on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Let's get those watch hours up. Hit that bell for the notification, let you know when these videos are uploaded. Find us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. We're open for business. If you have an ad, brand, restaurant you want us to promote, the Tiger videos are doing between 20,000 and 200,000 views a pop. So, just quick 5-10 second ads. I'd be happy to work something out with people on the other side and talk and negotiate. We will be back next week with another episode. I don't know who the guest is. We're recording these pretty far out in advance right now. That gives us plenty of time. I also want to say, and I was texting him tonight about it, but Austin Sisler, who just continues to do a masterful job with the production. And what you guys see is a small percentage of what he's doing. And that was a pretty emotional episode. So I'm kind of having a pretty emotional moment. And I just want to say, like, the creative freedom and the creative inspiration that has come with our friendship has been amazing. And I do not take that for granted. So shout out to him. Give him lots of love on social media. Follow Austin Sisler. He's the greatest. Thank you guys so much for continuing to watch and support this show during an interesting time. But I'm proud of that interview, and I hope that you guys enjoyed it. Thank you very much for tuning in, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Peace and happiness.
What the world needs now.